Sori.
And this is the, what is this?
Dear God.
Anarchy 99, which has my favorite name for an alliance. Now, there is another one called Classical Conspiracy, and then there's another one called The Syndicate that I really like. But The Syndicate is like a two-man group. And then the what do you call it? What was the other one? Classical Conspiracy is also like a 2 or 3.
I'm just going to say this now.
But Anarchy 99 is my
Anarchy
favorite.
99, when there's... Ooh.
What?
Anarchy 99, when their stuff comes up on the list, and... Yeah, mostly Anarchy 99. I'm the most interested in hearing what they have to put out. Because I feel like they challenge us as far as, like...
I agree with that.
Different topics and different...
Yeah.
So...
Yeah. It's a very...
Like, I don't know what I'm going to get.
Yeah. Yeah, they're a collection of... And no disrespect to anybody, but they're probably a collection of probably the most intellectual and heady people in the village.
Probably.
Which is saying a lot, because our group is... Yeah, I said this in the last fireside. Our group is...
we're up there.
Our group is up there, I believe. Somebody said something like, you're smarter than these people or something like that in the thing. And the guy was antagonizing me the whole night in the fireside. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, somebody is like a self-taught Silicon Valley person. Like, Peter can quote Hegel by memory. I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about, bro. Shout out to the big... I think somebody was like questioning, Overshadow Sean was questioning whether or not that was Lilo. You remember Lilo?
Oh, yeah.
Literally, because dude was stalking me the entire time. Like, going after me the entire time. Shout out to the big home. I think his name was Willow or something like that.
Really?
Yeah, it was Wilo.
Oh.
But the person wasn't like as bitter and as antagonistic as Lilo. Shout out to Lilo, I miss you.
Speaking of names, this is so terrible. So the kids were playing Among Us, and like they can all pick their own names. And Johan is playing. I actually thought he was like live streaming or something. He goes, "Well, that's a really weird name, Ben Dover." Ben Dover. He kept saying it. He didn't piece it together though, so I like really thought his innocence in the topic was really cute. But he must have said it like 10 times, and then like more time would pass, and then he would be like, Ben Dover, what a weird name. But I don't know, maybe he was trolling me now that I'm saying the story. He's 12, so maybe he was. Anyway.
I doubt very highly he got it. There you are. Yeah, it's so funny to me how these games become so giant and famous.
I know.
Like Fortnite, and then Apple pulled that stunt, and now it's Among Us, which is just a corny game that took probably 5% of the work that Fortnite did to create. Yeah. That's
They asked me for the first time last night. Johan was asking me for $3 so he could get skins.
That's a $3? Holy moly.
I did it though. I said yes.
That was probably one of the biggest takedowns in history. What Fortnite did, what Apple did.
Yeah,
with
but
Fortnite.
These little Among Us characters are like they're like the size of a pencil eraser. I'm like, what is a skin possibly?
I know.
$3 for the skin.
These kids are vacuuming. No vacuum. Oh, let me call the.
Honey, we're gonna be starting the song. They'll be done vacuuming by the time it's done.
No. They need to just use the broom.
No, because they're cleaning up glass.
What happened?
The Sensi burner.
Hey, hello? Turn off the vacuum.
Hey, what's up?
All right, that being said, dear God, XTC, let's go.
Here we go.
Sounds like a kid.
Yeah.
I don't mean a big reduction in the price of beef, but all the people that you made in your image, see them starving on their feet, 'cause they don't get enough to eat from God. Can't believe in you.
Dear God, sorry to disturb you, but I feel that I should be loud and clear. We all need a big reduction in amount of tears. don't believe in. I won't believe in heaven, hell, no saints, no sinners, no devil as well. The pearly gates, no thorny crown. You're always letting us humans down. The wars you bring, the babes you drown, those lost at sea and never found. And it's the same the whole world round. The earth I see helps to compound. The Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. It's just our eyes on the holy host. And if you're up there, you perceive that my heart's here upon the sea. If there's one thing I don't believe in,
It's you. Dear
Okay, that was pretty interesting.
Oh,
Actually.
there was a video. Ah.
Was
it
your
says the video's
alarm
on there.
going off during this?
Yeah. Yeah, it went off for a second. I turned it off though.
That's why I said in the middle of the song, I'm like, it sounds like there's like an alarm in the background of this music. But I actually thought it was, like, it's alarms, especially like the ones that we grew up with, like the sound of that alarm, like there was no variation. It was, when I hear that, it literally makes my head feel weird every single time I hear it. So I thought it was just to like, they had that in like the backdrop to kind of like bring more like, yes, there's a problem here.
That would have been a very interesting touch.
Yes.
So
yes.
I'm looking at this band. None of them look like kids. They must have had a kid guest sing on that. Because they sounded,
Yeah.
especially the first verse, it sounded like a kid, right?
Yep. Yep.
Let me see.
Maybe it
I wish
was
we
one
would've
of their
seen-
kids.
I wish we would have seen the official video. There's the official video right there. I'll play the official video while we're talking.
On the
Go
side
ahead.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one I thought was pretty interesting because, like, for the majority of it, you could kind of be like, he was talking about two different gods. Like, one, he's talking to up, that he was like up in heaven, that maybe is like the good guy. And then there's this perceived idea of what God is that is down here, and it's in the perception and minds of the people. And so,
Yeah. Where
almost
did- where
like
the internet?
almost like that the one that's up there doesn't understand the goings on of the world down here.
Oh, okay. So this is kind of like a D. Oh, yeah, that makes sense because he talks about. I don't know if you noticed about your names in a lot of quotes on this.
Yeah.
Book. So it's kind of like a deistic type of thing.
Yeah.
Where God basically spun up the universe and he's off doing.
Right. And then
You know,
he's like,
whatever.
I think that you should take another look back here and see what's going on.
Yeah. I see that.
But then at the end he said, but he keeps saying, I can't believe in you. And so
He also said I won't, which I thought was very, very honest.
yeah.
He said I can't believe in, won't believe in. I won't. Right there. I won't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very honest.
Yeah, I agree. But, these topics have troubled the minds of lots of people. Books have been written, discussions have been had, because when it's like you have this idea that, okay, if God really does exist and he's really supposed to be all good, then how is it that bad stuff can be happening? Especially to, like he said, the babes you drowned, you know what I mean? Like, nobody feels bad when an objectively bad person that we can basically all agree is bad has something bad happen to them. Like, people are like, karma's a bitch, and they want karma for people that do something like bad. But then, we don't want karma when it comes to our stuff, because we have probably a reason for why we did what we did.
Well, he's going to say the baby didn't generate any karma.
Well, yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of like the dilemma. It's like,
And if
so
my
if you're supposed to be
atheist-
good, then how come you're
if
letting
my-
this
if-
happen?
if my atheist
or
friends-
making it happen.
If my atheist friends were consistent with concern for babies, I'd be very happy. Yeah. Well, there's so many ways to engage in situations like this or questions like this. And you can look at it from the hyper-reform camp, which is Romans 1 dictates your entire perception of every person claiming to be an atheist or agnostic, which is you know there's a God, you're just suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, and you're just using the problem of evil to justify your own evil, blah, 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 blah. And it's just very, very simple, like, whatever. And that was pretty much my perspective. This is one of the major things that changed me being in the channel and interacting with other human beings. So, like, I look at a guy like Ian, and, like, Ian and I are having a side conversation. I made a video for Ian, I sent him a video, and I, you know, so we're kind of, like, going back and forth a little bit about this thing that I did that we're doing on the side.
Okay.
I did a fireside. There's lots of people, not lots of people, but there were significant, you know, people started asking me a lot of theological questions in the fireside, and it was a free form. Sometimes we're doing a fireside, there's a political discussion. Other times it's just completely free form. So I was answering theological questions, and then I was talking about LeBron James. You know what I mean? Like, but I got a couple emails after that were pretty tough to deal with emotionally,
Really?
just because of how people have been, you know, treated and putting a God stamp on it and blah 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 blah. Which of course God is, you know, higher than all that stuff, and it's not something that I, you know, that I think he can't overcome. But you know, sometimes, like, in certain circles, like when you see these apologetics videos, you know, like, it's like this mathematical formula, and it's like people. So I had one. I'm not gonna say a person's name because, I mean, he shared it within, like, the Bible Boogie group, but I don't know if he's actually shared it, like, in public. But he was kind of half in, half out on religion. But his dad was dying of, I don't know if it was cancer or whatever. And then he was praying and he was fasting and he was doing all the stuff that the little evangelical circle told him he was supposed to do. His dad ended up dying anyway.
Yeah.
And so now when I'm talking to him and he's, you know, agnostic, atheist, I don't know what he is, but that's not as simple as just saying, you know, there's a guy who's suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. That's a person who is saying, these are what the representatives told me I should do, and I did it. And like that's not as simple as just saying that's a guy who's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and there were multiple discussions like that with multiple people, and I kind of pulled back and I was like, and there's other times I've had the discussion where it's like, that's exactly what's happening with X, Y, and Z person. You know, they'll ask a question and that they think is some gotcha question, and you answer it, and you can clearly see that they're disappointed that this was a, you know.
Yes, that's true.
You know, like just recently, like the whole, oh, they're selling their daughters into sexual slavery, and then it actually turns out that the text is like one of the most pro-woman passages of all time, including the modern day. Yeah. And you could tell there's like a visible disappointment. And I'm like, okay, you're definitely a Romans 1 guy for sure. But it's definitely the channel definitely has changed. It really forced me to augment how I interpreted Romans chapter 1. It really did.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and, you know, our spiritual tradition, you know, we would probably most closely align, especially theological, when you talk about the technicals of theology, we would say, okay, we're probably Reformed, right? Reformed theology. But, like, Romans 1 is not the only passage in the Bible. There's also, you are not far from the kingdom.
Right.
Which I almost never hear Reformed people say ever to anyone.
Yeah.
So you had a guy who was asking questions. He was an inquisitor, and he and Jesus are going back and forth. And at the end of the conversation, Jesus says, "You're not far from the kingdom." So why can't that be the paradigm? So to me, so yes, interacting with folks in the channel, where I was like, okay. Listening to certain experiences, especially some of our LGBT folk, like Tina, you know, hearing some of the things that Zonia went through. You know, I don't think that you can hear those stories and just go, You know, like that's a
Oh,
lot
yeah,
of deep
absolutely.
pain, and you know.
Absolutely.
But you know, on the other side, there was this other guy I was talking to that I don't want to name. Who was raised in a Christian environment, and then you know God found him at some point during the channel or whatever, and then for a while he was like a Satanist. So he was a Christian, and then it was a horrible, abusive Christian environment. He became a Satanist, and you know now he's him and God have squashed the beef and they figured it out.
Yep.
And you know, I was saying to him like his soiree into Satanism, and I forgot if it was theistic
You
Satanism.
shocked me the first time you said this, but I've come to agree with you.
I said that was good, and it was important for him to do that for his mental health. And even as he was going into Satanism, he was still fighting for the true God, because what he was saying is, if God is like this, if God is like the way you guys are saying He is, then I'm going to go to the opposite.
Yep.
Well, God wasn't like the way those people were saying He was. So him going into Satanism is like the opposite. For that brief time was actually him fighting for the true God. Because these people had made God into such a goblin that Satan was a preferable alternative.
Yep.
And you know, some Christianities, notice I'm saying Christianities, I'm not saying Jesus, but some Christianities are mentally destructive to people. You know, it'll emotionally exhaust and wreck you. So, like,
Yeah.
I just think people's reasons for believing or unbelieving
I went to a
are...
Bible college, and there's been some major fallout from that, as in the people that went there and their mindsets now what they were then, and it's there was a lot of destructive.
Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't destructive ideologies within certain strands of modern atheism, because there have.
Oh, yeah.
And I have personally had to counsel people out of the fallout of that, especially the current iteration. So, you know,
Yeah.
But the difference is, one group is claiming to speak for the Almighty,
Right.
which has, in my opinion, way deeper ramifications than
I would agree.
than the abuses in the other group.
Yeah.
Like, I don't believe, like, when you talk about, like, harming children, I believe that anytime you harm a child in a sexual manner, it's horrible. But I do believe that when a religious person does it to a child, it is triply horrible. I had a guy in the fireside.
Or a parent.
We were right.
Because there's
Correct.
people that should be in authority, and they should be like protection places. Like your parents, that should be a very, very safe place for you. Your religious leaders, they should be a very, very safe place for you. You should be able to communicate your whatever to them, and they should be able to help you. And so for you to be in those circumstances, especially when the person communicates a certain level of weakness to the religious leader, and then the religious leader takes that and uses that to,
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, people were saying all types of craziness on Facebook. And I had all the receipts from all these people.
I know.
Because people tell you they're deep, dark, whatever.
yeah.
And it didn't even it didn't even cross my mind to blow those people up. Because I'm like, they told me that in confidence. Like, I don't give a damn what our relationship is now.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go and betray that confidence just because they're acting crazy. You know, let Allah deal with them at the end of the day, but I'm not gonna do that shit.
Yeah.
Go for it.
They knew it though, so
Like-
that's a good thing. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, they knew I wasn't gonna do that to them. But, so I think my point is, like, this stuff is very, very complex, and just the trigger of, oh, you're just using this to justify your disbelief, I think brushes over the human element of people's life experiences. And you can say that, you know, your life experience and your emotion doesn't affect objective truth, blah, blah, blah. I understand that, but I don't care, because I'm dealing with human beings. So I'm going to assume the best of the person, that these are valid questions and that they're seeking for God. And I think when people who are completely confirmed in their unbelief and want to disbelieve, like, they've made themselves pretty clear. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like, there are certain other forums I'm in, shoot a video, whatever, and ask this Bible question, there's always one or two people that come back to me and say, holy moly, I didn't think about that. Now I need to They never say, oh, I'm going to be a Christian tomorrow, or I'm going to believe in God, but they go, okay.
That's making me think.
Okay,
Yeah.
I gotta think. And that's all you can ask for.
Right.
But then you have other people who, they're just plainly dishonest or whatever. I'm like, okay, Romans 1. Mm-hmm. But you have other people, and I'm like, oh, okay, Ian's not far from the kingdom. Like, I believe that him and God are going to figure it out and they're going to close the deal. But that's not for me to say when and how, But so all that to say that my posture in engaging with these lyrics is to say that this is a sincere person, as much as I can read sincerity, and that they're looking around in the world and trying to figure out.
I would totally agree with that.
What the heck is going on?
I especially think that because they started the song out with a child's voice. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like that, like childlikeness coming to God and saying, we have a problem here. And even like, dear God, sorry to disturb you, but first of all, God doesn't feel that way. He doesn't feel like, my God, they're disturbing me again. But I think, yeah, like when you're reading this and you're listening to this song, it did say, I don't know what diamond blue is though.
Did you make the disease in the diamond blue? Like the same God who makes amazing things like diamonds, the same God who makes diseases. What's up with that?
Okay. But yeah, I definitely think that this person seemed, sincere and questioning things, and the stuff that they're questioning, like sometimes people are like, remember that song? It was like, and maybe I'm mixing it up. It was like an old song, and she was asking God for a Mercedes. She's asking God for a this. Remember that song?
No. What?
It's an old one.
Did we do it? Did we cover it?
No. Okay, but anyway, but it's like this idea that, like you're asking God for all of these big, huge things, and it's like, well, you know what I mean? Like if somebody was sitting around upset that they don't have a Mercedes, it's like, well, I mean, did you need
Oh
that?
Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz?
Yeah. My friends all drive Porsches.
I must make amends.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like this idea that like God should get her that, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
But this person's coming, and I don't even know how serious her song was, but this person, the stuff that they're bringing up is legitimate stuff that like that is problematic.
Well, it assumes. See, I think Lewis handled that question the best about the problem of evil, and he's saying the very fact that we're complaining about the problem of evil indicates that we know that something is wrong, and if something is wrong, then there is an ultimate standard of right and wrong, or objective good or bad.
Yeah.
And so where does that come from? Like, a lot of times, here's one of the things that I've noticed, is that when you're in a debate, they'll say, many of my atheist friends will say, there's no objective criteria for right or wrong. So when you're in a debate and that is a debate topic, they'll come out and say, no, there isn't. Then they'll augment it with Sam Harris. Sam Harris is a well-being discussion. So if we can all agree on human well-being, then you can establish objective morality. Because if we establish that the goal is not to burn down our house, then we can objectively say leaving the oven on and a rag by it dipped in kerosene is objectively wrong because we've all agreed. So, so that's an augment. That's a way that they believe that they can get an objective morality without God. Of course, the answer to that is very simple, which is the concept of human well-being is not axiomatic. So, for example, drapetomania is the mental illness of a slave wanting his freedom.
Yeah.
I'm not lying to you. Look it up yourself. Drapetomania is a slave wanting to be free. And there you had scientists and senators saying, yeah, Negroes cannot handle the burden and the exigencies of freedom. And so the best thing for them is actually to re-enslave them. And that's going to promote the well-being of the Negro. And obviously having a slave force promotes the well-being of the white man in the American South. So both parties are cared for. So that's what they believe about well-being.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, a modern person would be like, Well, most modern people. You know what I'm saying? Like, look at the current political situation we're in. When you have the healthcare crisis, nobody's denying that there's a healthcare crisis, but there's disagreements as to what's going to promote the most well-being in the country. So, well-being is not something that's axiomatic and obvious to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, I had a friend of mine. He said, "Come on, Vin, well-being is obvious. You can either torture somebody or give them their favorite soda. Obviously, everybody knows that's axiomatic. You know, everybody can know. You don't need, a science experiment to know what well-being is. But this is the same guy.
Well,
this is the same guy. He's the same guy. I have a screenshot of it. He is the same guy who said, "I know that a fetus is a human being."
that's literally what I was thinking.
It's the same dude. He said, "I know a fetus is a human being, and I don't give a fuck." And he knows what happens to these kids. And this is a guy who's like a radical, like up to the moment of birth, we should be able to
Oh my gosh.
to slice and dice these kids.
Oh my gosh.
So the whole well-being concept is not as axiomatically obvious as people think it is. But here's my point. My point is, when there's a debate, and especially when there's an audience.
Well, hold on. I don't know that it's not as obvious or as easy as that. Like, I think that it is obvious to people, but we delude ourselves because we want things higher than the greater good. Because I think that there's some people that probably are genuinely confused about the abortion topic, but I think lots of people know we are tearing apart a child limb from limb, and
yeah, that one's an obvious one. But like for example, I would say that the best possible application of human sexuality that promotes well-being would be in a monogamous marriage. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that because I'm a Christian, and I'm assuming that if God decreed something, it's for our good. Mm-hmm. But most secularists would say, "Well, no, just the best thing, the human sexuality is to have as many sexual partners as you possibly can, and have as much pleasure as you possibly can, and just make sure you wrap it up or kill the kid if you get pregnant." So that's another one of those where I don't think it's. I could see a secularist genuinely believing that monogamy actually is bad for human well-being, and that sexual liberty is actually good. The assumption is the more freedom, the more variety you have, the better. So I think there's some stuff that's obvious, like the slavery thing. I think that they knew that they were evil as hell and they were just deluding themselves. Abortion thing in the modern day. But I do think that there are other categories of topics where
I'd agree with that.
I think a secular person would absolutely say, no, this is better for human well-being than that. So stem cell research, for example, is another one. I think that we think it's wrong because these are image bearers of God, no matter how small they are. But they're looking at it like, well, it'll help so many other people. And I don't believe that they believe that they're wrong and they're just... See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So my point is, like, when there's a debate about it or whatever, people are locked in and they'll say, no, there's no objective morality because obviously you can't have one with an empty universe. But on the day-to-day... Mm-hmm. They act as if they believe in objective right or wrong.
Right.
Like I've never heard any of them say, well, child molesting. I don't know. It just depends. And everybody kind of universally, except for child molesters, say, no, I thought there was no. You know what I mean? So the very fact that the person is rightly, when I say complaining, I mean complaining in the legal sense. You know how in court they say this is a complainant.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people don't realize about the Bible is that these questions are asked, and God is challenged a bunch of times in these situations. Like the book of Job. Job had a horrible situation happen to him, and he initially starts off doing very, very well. Naked I came into the world, and naked I'll leave. The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Mm-hmm. And he started off pretty good, but then as it progressed and as the losses started to sink in, Job starts saying, "I'm going to take God to court, and I would have my lead prosecutor, and I would tell him what to say, and I would make him answer me, and it got real."
Yeah.
And of course, God shows up, and God doesn't answer his question directly. God never says, "Hey, Job, listen, there was this thing with the devil and the thing, and on top of that, your story is
you're right. Yeah.
your story is going to be used to encourage millions of people and keep
Yeah.
people from killing themselves and things like that. And there's going to be this couple in 4,873 years from now. There's going to be this couple, and they're going to talk to people about your situation.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't do any of that.
Right.
He comes down in the glory cloud and just starts asking them a bunch of questions. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Where were you before the foundations of the earth were laid? Where were you when the morning stars sang for glory and the sons of God shouted for joy? Mm-hmm. And he just asked them like 45 questions in a row. And of course the answer is, you. Maybe there's things I know that you don't know. Is that possible? And I think, some of this is when you get kids for yourself, like those questions become very, very obvious. Mm-hmm. Because kids can only function on limited information, and as a parent, you're not going to tell your kid everything. When the kids were like 3 or 4, I didn't tell them about child molesters. Right? So, if they're playing in a park or something like that, and it just got to the point where I couldn't watch them, and other people couldn't watch them, I would just cut it short and take them home. Mm-hmm. And they're yelling, they're crying, how could you do this to me, yada, yada, yada. And I didn't explain it to them. Mm-hmm. I said, no, I'm not going to explain. Okay, well, you figure something else out, bro. And obviously that's a trivial issue, right? But let's assume for a second, what if God was real? And what if the afterlife was really real? And what if there's eternal life? And what if what we call dying, is just transitioning to another dimension? Mm-hmm. So we're in this dimension. And when you talk about quantum mechanics and simulation theory and things like that, like there's enough, especially in the modern day, there is enough, even in the scientific world, to say that's feasible.
Right.
Like I was, I'll try to find the thing again with Neil deGrasse Tyson and these other physicists. They're all up there, and they're like from all over the world, and they were all wearing dark glasses for some reason. I don't know what that is. I don't know. Somebody, maybe I can get Alec to explain that to me. I don't understand why they do that. But anyway, the guy starts talking about simulation theory. So they're all going back and forth about simulation theory, and then one of these physicists says, that opens the door for God and all the rest of it, and resurrection and all that, because really, if it's all a simulation, you just take the information and re-download it and put the information in another, physical body, or, delete that simulation and go to the next simulation. Like, that absolutely opens the door for a lot of this stuff. And then, when you hear things like the sky will recede like a scroll and all this stuff, I don't believe that heaven is necessarily up there. I just think it's another dimension that we haven't figured out yet, and that's why I always think there will be scientists in the next world. But what if all that was real? That changes things. Like the people that drown and things like that, that changes things. But if the person drowns at sea and that's it, their body descends down to the Davy Jones locker and they get chewed up by piranhas or whatever, and that's the end of it, fine. I would say, that's a horrific way to end the story. But you can't bring God into that, because the minute you bring God into that, you have to concede that there would be an alternate afterlife. That's true.
No, you're right.
You can't combine them.
Right.
It's either there's no God and they drown at the bottom of the sea,
yep,
or there is a God, in which means that he inhabits another dimension and he could take that person to another dimension. Mm-hmm. You can't have it both ways. Mm-hmm. If you're really trying to seek an answer. Right? Yeah. So, kids can't perceive certain things because they haven't experienced them yet. Like Orion Reza is in a situation where all he knows is hanging out here. Mm-hmm. And that's all.
2 weeks from delivery.
And what if there was like an entire society in the womb and everybody's kind of there, and then when a person gets really old, like 9 months old, they leave. To the people in your womb, yelling, screaming, and you're going into this. To the people in the womb, that would be the equivalent of dying. But you're actually living for the first time. Mm-hmm. You were actually constricted in this environment, and now you're actually going out into. So what if the whole thing is a womb, and what if what we're calling death is actually another birth. Well, you don't know that because
Right.
all you've experienced, you would have to have somebody from the outside get inside there and say, actually, guys, you don't have to be afraid. It's actually going to be, it's going to be a bumpy arrival, right? But I'm telling you, there's going to be stuff that you would not believe. And you're going to be able to, the world is going to be crazy. And on top of that, you're going to be able to do so many more things with your body. It's going to be insane, bro. But you would need somebody from the outside to tell you that it's going to be like that.
Yeah, it's crazy too, because when you think, they, like Reza in my womb can just hear our voices.
Right.
He's never like seen us and stuff like that.
Right.
And then remember how Job said like before, like I only heard of you through the hearing of the ears, but now
Right.
my eye sees
Right.
you.
Right.
And when you think about like when we die and we go to the next place, like if you kind of like put all that information together and you're like, okay, so we're going to see for the first time where we've only been hearing.
Correct.
Like what that would be like. Like
Correct.
the relationships that we've had here are just like we heard through the walls of the womb, but.
Correct. Right. And, you know, and everybody in the society of the womb, all they know is the womb. And all they know is that somebody leaves it and they never go back. You know what I mean? And so, you know, if you look at the world that way, then that's kind of one plank, right? The other thing for me is that, you know, we're not anti-vaxxers. So Dorian, I wasn't supposed to be able to have kids. So when I had Dorian, it was a very, very, very special type of thing. To this moment, I mean, you guys see me in DL Beluga life. We have it's a very, very special relationship. And, you know, I was carrying him most of the time, every day. I was doing everything with him. You know, and if he cried, I got him. If he had a wet diaper, I took care of him. I just made sure that he was in maximal comfort. And then one day, I picked him up, I strapped him into his car seat, and I drove him to a place that he didn't recognize. And then two people who he'd never seen in his life entered the room, and I held him down while they grabbed his legs and jammed these needles into his arm and his leg, and caused him tremendous amounts of pain. I orchestrated that entire situation. It would be ridiculous to say, well, I didn't jam the needle into your arm. And you know, the way he looked at me, like, if he could have talked, he could have said, how could you do this to me? And I just remember, you know, after that I held him, he was crying, I was crying. Like, that was just one of those moments you have with God where I just said, okay. And honestly, since that moment, I've never questioned God's goodness in my suffering ever again. Ever. But I've been uncomfortable, I've been unhappy, I've been, this sucks. Why did you write this into my story? But as far as like God's goodness, I've never questioned it again, because of so many experiences that I've had as a father, because of, you know, certain situations have been about managing, you know, avoiding pain and things of that nature and not telling them certain things, and having access to more information that they could even, you know, what if you're an all-knowing person? Could God orchestrate a situation where you had massive pain, but it resulted in a great benefit afterward? Which, of course, the scripture says, I consider that our light and momentary afflictions are working for us an eternal weight of glory that will far supersede and surpass the suffering we've endured. Most people believe in that type of syllogism, and I know that because every single good story I've ever heard anybody say includes some sort of suffering and then redemption in the suffering and all that. Like, I've never seen a person say, oh yeah, you know, Lord of the Rings is okay, but it would have just been great if Frodo just stayed in the Shire and there was no Mount Doom, and there were losses in that story, man. You know, Boromir got it, you know what I mean? He got all shot up. But there was a story of redemption because he was kind of crazy, but then he ends up, I think it was Boromir, he ends up dying and taking all these bullets for these kids. And it's a messianic kind of moment where the strong, able-bodied person dies in protection of the weak. So there's just so many things where Star Wars is another one, as corny as it may be, where Darth Vader is this horrible, evil character. But then at the very, very end of the story, they're all partying in some afterlife together, and everybody's good with each other and all the rest of it. But there was a lot of darkness and evil at the beginning that made that scene
Right.
that much sweeter.
Right. Exactly.
And that scene would not have been, and it was corny as hell in my opinion, but that scene would not have been as impactful if you just saw 5 hours straight of everybody just partying and having a good time.
Of course.
There had to be, so we recognize that in struggle and in pain and suffering, that when the redemption happens, it becomes that much sweeter. And I think that's why that principle is played out in so many contexts. It's one of the reasons I love, sometimes I'll just go on YouTube and I'll watch the last 2 minutes of any championship game. Because there you will see the pinnacle of alpha, male, masculine, testosterone, some of it artificial testosterone induced men bawling their eyes out, crying their eyes out. Anthony Davis is like almost 7 feet tall. You know, the guy's a Goliath. And in the last 30 seconds, he's reduced to sitting on the bench and just crying. And then you'll see these grown men who are usually, especially black men, are not very good about showing affection to other black men in a raw, vulnerable way in public. You'll see them hugging each other. I just saw, last night I was looking at it, Mariano Rivera. It was beautiful. I'm actually going to include it in the clip. It was beautiful. Mariano Rivera and Derek Jeter and Andy Pettitte, they all came up together in the Yankee organization. And they became legendary. They won five titles together. They played together for like 15, 20 years. And it was time for Rivera to retire. I mean, it was over for him. And it was his last game. And the Yankees were down 4-0. So usually he was the closer. So the closer is the guy that wins the game for you at the end. He's a pitcher. But we were down 4-0. There was no way that he was going to be able to... So they bring him out, and oddly enough, Mariano comes out to Enter Sandman, Metallica.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's basically like, Rivera's going to put you to sleep, it's over. So he comes out, and before he throws the first pitch, Jeter and Pettitte come out. They start walking the field, and they do this. And what happens is, when a pitcher's had enough, when it's time for him to sit down, the manager will come out and say, you did a great job, but you got to sit down, it's over for you tonight. So Jeter and Pettitte come out and do this, and they walk up to him, and Mariano just starts bawling, and they hug, and he wouldn't let him go. And then finally Pettitte says, you gotta let me go, and he says something in his ear, and then he kisses him on the head, and then it was just a beautiful moment. And what's going on there? These guys had lived together, they'd sacrificed together, they'd lost together, they won together. It's the story of all the things that they all went. They had personal problems. Pettitte had a HGH issue, Mariano had a marriage issue. One of Mariano's friends died after 9/11. But these guys were all together with each other and experienced so much together. And so that hug, that moment was a sweet, sweet moment. And if their entire life had just been a party, like I've been around party people, and all they do is party, and the only time they see each other is when they're at a party. Those are not deep relationships. Your deep relationships are the ones where you've had conflict and you've struggled and you've gone through hell and back with the person, internal conflicts, external conflicts. And if you're still standing at the end with that person, that's a for life type of, that's something that's special. But if you're just partying with a person and life is just a giant party, it's not as deep. So for me, I look at all those situations and I see so much of, Jesus in that situation. Because that's what it's going to be like for me on my last day here. He's going to say, all right, Vin. It's over. You know what I mean? And that's how I perceive death, is that, when he talks about the angels and all that, and, you're assigned an angel. That's what I believe, at least one. And so that angel who's been with me my whole life, he's going to come, and Jesus is going to come. It's going to be a long hug. I'm sure he's going to kiss me on my head. And there's gonna be a lot of tears, and the tears are gonna be a lot of things, like happy to be there, obviously, happy to see him closer, obviously, but it's also gonna be my entire life in the struggle, and you know, my mom going when I was a baby, and then dad doesn't love me as much, but he really does. But just so many things, and every scar I've had, and every scar I've inflicted, and being forgiven of all that, and loved in spite of it, and all that, and all of that is gonna be worth it. And then the guy who's hugging me's got nail prints in his hand. You know, like it's the most beautiful thing of all time. And of course, when you talk about the problem of suffering, we've got a God who actually came down specifically to engage and enter into it. Not a God who's up there in, you know, the Elysian fields chilling out, eating grapes, and, you know, he came down here, man, and he grinded with us.
Peeled grapes.
Peeled grapes, you know. So yeah, that moment with Mariano and Andy Pettit was it's a special moment, and it really encapsulates there's a lot of theology. Both those guys are Christians, but there's a lot of theology there. A lot of theology there. And that's why I love looking at those moments with those guys, because the more pain you endure to get to a certain place, it heightens your celebration.
Yeah.
And I've just been convinced that God, all of these things are done to increase our joy on the other end. The degree to which you suffer, you know, whether it's basketball, Navy SEAL, delivering a baby, the degree to which you suffer is the degree to which your joy is exponentialized, in my opinion. So, and it's been my experience, and you know, I feel very grateful to God that He speaks to me a lot in those moments. You know what I mean? Because I know that the Lord's been very gracious to me, because a lot of people don't see God in this
It's weird because, to a degree, I agree with you that pain, you know, can bring about those things, but at the same time, sometimes if there's too much pain, then it turns into trauma, and so then you don't, like, for instance, you know, Orion's delivery was extremely painful.
Yeah.
But that was part of why I celebrated so much that he was born, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Selah's delivery was so painful and so long, it was like a traumatic event.
Yeah. Well, it was a traumatic event. Yeah.
So
I think every birth is a traumatic event to a degree for moms. I mean,
yeah, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think that you would ever trade. Like, if you had to choose between getting rid of that pain and getting rid of the
no, of course. But
Yeah.
there are some situations in life that it's so painful, and it was so traumatic that it's hard to, maybe you don't see the good effects of it here. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, and you know, there's lots of things that are untied shoelaces for me in this world, but He has come through so many times that I have no doubt that when I get over there, I'm gonna you know, it's that line in Isaiah 53 where it says, "Out of the anguish of his soul he shall see and be satisfied," which is talking about Christ in relation to His suffering. And it says, out of the anguish of his soul, he will see and be satisfied. See what? And, you know, and Hebrews says, you know, Jesus for the joy that was set before him. And then you go to Jude, and it says, to him who is able to keep you from falling and present you unstained before his glorious throne in the presence with great joy. So, Jesus is going to the cross, and there's a sense in, I mean, he's a woman in labor going through a very traumatic labor and birthing process, and he is saying, this sucks really bad, but it's gonna be worth it. And and so, you know, that's something I hold on to a lot. Out of the anguish of your soul you will see and be satisfied. Like, we're gonna look back and say, I wouldn't change a thing. And right now there are lots of things I would change based on the limited knowledge that I have. But when I get over there into that other dimension, and then there's a rewind of the sim, I'll say, oh, okay.
That's fine.
And I'll say, okay, that was worth it. And so, but I'm not saying that out of blind faith. I'm saying that because there have been so many instances where He's already given me a preview of that in this life, where I go, oh, okay. So, you know, definitely a good song. We went really long on this one. Apologize, guys. But I wanted to give the song the respect that it deserved, because it's asking and I didn't want to launch into an apologetics. Like, there's so many angles you can go with it, but I just think sometimes like apologists are like professors who spend all their time in academia and don't have any dirt underneath their fingernails. So
heavenly minded and no earthly good.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think that there's a time and a place for it. Obviously, I think there's a time and a place for it. But I also think that it's just really interesting. When Jesus came down here, he didn't engage in a lot of, that stuff. I mean, he definitely engaged in public discourse. He definitely said some not very nice things to people. But he was also among the people and he got dirty with everybody. And so, love the big homie for that. What do you get the song?
Sonically, it was like probably like an 8.5 for me. But I'm gonna bump it to a 10 because I think it's such an important thing and it's an important topic. So 10 for me.
I thought the angle of adding the kid was interesting because I'm pretty sure the kid is not in the band. So I thought it's gonna get 0.5 points for uniqueness. Sonically, but lyrically, I think he did a really, really good job. Really, really good job. I don't believe that he was like being disrespectful at all lyrically. I really don't think he was being crazy or disrespectful at all.
I need to get out of this chair. I'm getting these really weird cramps. So if you want to finish and take
That being the case, 9.2. Been out.
Sorry, out.
Gone.
Don't believe it. I won't believe in heaven, hell, no saints, no sinners, no devil as well. The pearly gates, no thorny crown. You're always letting us humans down. The wars you bring, the babes you drown. Those lost at sea are never found. And it's the same the whole world round. The land I see helps to compound. The Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. It's just so easy on the Holy Host. And if you're up there, you perceive that my heart's here upon the sea. But there's one thing I don't believe in.
It's you. Dear Dear God, hope you got the letter and I pray you can make it better down here. I don't mean a big reduction in the price of beer, but all the people that